Our next speaker has lived and worked overseas and around New Zealand. She is a member of the National Council of Women and UN Women. She has spent her work life advocating on behalf of groups of people whose voices are often unheard. Now, that's amazing in itself, right? But this blows me away. Also was mugged in broad daylight in Auckland after returning from a visit from Bangladesh. No joke. Must be all that flash Bangladesh dollars, eh? But so I just had to talk to her, and I said, what happened? But she ran after the guy, she got her handbag back, and she punched his car door. Give her a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage MP Priyanca Radhakrishnan.
Thanks for that, Vaughan. I think that's probably the most colourful introduction I've ever had. I wanted to begin, though, with a bit of a quote, and it goes like this. We define ourselves as a nation of immigrants. That's who we are in our bones. The promise we see in those who come here from every corner of the globe, that's always been one of our greatest strengths. It keeps our workforce young. It keeps our country on the cutting edge, and it's helped build the greatest economic engine the world has ever known. Now, that was actually Barack Obama in 2013 talking about the United States, but equally, it's true of New Zealand. Approximately exactly 97.2% of New Zealand's enterprises are accounted for by small and medium enterprises. And that actually tends to be the category that our migrant communities have their businesses in, or the types of businesses that our migrant communities have. Increasingly, we've made an impact on the transformation of the suburbs and the cities that we live in. And that's not a surprise, given the propensity of migrant communities to start businesses. That largely, both if you look at what's happening here in New Zealand and also overseas, tends to be because of two reasons. One is, and I think that's something many of us will identify with, is that people move countries because they want to do better for themselves, aspirations for their families, their children. But unfortunately, it's also sometimes a little bit about what is known as mobility blockers. Some of the reasons that people, and evidence tells us this is particularly true for women small business owners within our diverse ethnic communities, it's sometimes some of the blockers that block us from getting into the labour force that then leads to women starting their own businesses. So a few different reasons there. According to Stats New Zealand, Asian women are the largest ethnic cohort that are likely to be self-employed. Internationally, women immigrants have acknowledged to be sort of the fastest growing groups of small business owners as well. However, whether you talk to some of our entrepreneurs, particularly women here or overseas, one of the biggest barriers to them advancing, to us advancing, is confidence that holds our communities back. And that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about, because that's something that I know intimately from my own life. So I was asked to talk a little bit about leadership, and I thought I'd focus a little bit on this. So I moved here to New Zealand as a young adult. I came here to finish an undergrad degree. I moved to Palmerston North in the middle of winter from a city-state, a tropical, hot island country known as Singapore. So straight into the middle of winter in Palmy, where I didn't know a soul, but that's partly what drew me to New Zealand. The fact that I didn't know anyone and that I could chart my own path in a sense. None of it actually involved going after muggers, but that's par for the course, apparently, sometimes. So for me, it was, when I talk about self-confidence or self-esteem, it was largely about figuring out where I fit in this new country that I moved to, how I could contribute, what I could do, and that little niggling thing that a lot of people, I realized, a lot of women particularly face, called imposter syndrome. Are you good enough? There's always that little voice at the back of your head, asking you whether you're good enough to do this. But between then and now, I've worked with so many people whose confidence has been shattered. And that's women survivors of gender-based violence. That's migrant workers who come here and are exploited in our labor market. It's international students who are sold a picture of what they hope to achieve in this new country, this land of hope and aspiration, who then come here and realize that the reality they're experiencing is at odds with what they've been sold. Not all. I came here as an international student myself, but some, and that's too many. I've also spoken to many younger New Zealanders from our different, diverse, multicultural communities, many of whom, whether they're Sri Lankan New Zealanders, Indian New Zealanders, Chinese New Zealanders, who came here to New Zealand as young children, who've grown up here. And I spoke to this one young woman who said something that has stuck with me over the years. She said, I came here when I was very young. I grew up thinking that I was the same as every other New Zealander here, with the same aspirations, the same hopes. But it's only when I started to apply for jobs or board positions or anything else that was a leadership position that my otherness was fed back to me, and I was made to feel different. So I want to focus on that a little bit today, in the time that I have left, because it is a bit of a gray area. Leadership and identity is not something that we talk about very often, but it's something that we absolutely have to address and that we have to discuss and acknowledge, because as New Zealand grows, as we become increasingly a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multicultural New Zealand, these are issues. If we want to grow the next generation of authentic leaders, then it's something we have to address. Where do we fit? And how does that fit in with leadership aspirations as well? And then we've got to get to a point where we actually, once we've identified what some of those barriers are, that we work to remove them as well. And I've had to grapple with that as well as a New Zealand Member of Parliament who was born in India, who grew up in Singapore, and is now a proud New Zealander. I've had to grapple with some of those questions myself in this role. It's been a year that I've been in this role. I've just completed a year in it. Plus, I tend to overthink things a little bit. So I'll give you a little bit of an example. So yesterday, a few colleagues of mine and I went to Government House. And we got to go to a reception that was organised, hosted by the Governor-General. It was celebrating 125 years of suffrage in New Zealand, which, by the way, is the other part of the reason that I chose to move here. I've worked in the women's rights space all my life, and the fact that New Zealand was the first country in the world where women fought and won the right to vote was a huge deal for me, because it wasn't just about the act of voting, that was a huge part of it, but it was also about fairness and about equality and about taking down some of those barriers that disproportionately affect certain groups. And it was about voting, because that's how you have a say in how the nation is shaped and how the nation grows and how you ensure that your voice is heard as well. So I digress. Back to yesterday's reception. We got invited to this Government House, never been there before. I thought it'd be great to go to celebrate something that is, so iconic for us, so important, so powerful. But what do I wear? So the invitation that we got, the dress code that was specified on that basically said that women could wear cocktail or tea-length dresses. I had to Google that one, didn't know what a tea-length dress was, or cultural attire. And so I thought, given that yesterday was also Wellington Diwali, that both Michael and I and a few of our colleagues, including the minister, attended, I thought a few hours between Diwali and the reception, so maybe I'll just wear my sari, because I was going to wear a sari anyway for Diwali, because that's acceptable. It's a cultural space. But then I thought, can I actually though? Can I wear a sari to this event, which is in Government House? It's not an Indian event. I'm a New Zealand MP. So I grappled with all of that, thought about it. And that was sort of my roundabout way of getting, I guess, to my aha moment of who I am. Yes, I represent New Zealand, and I'm extremely proud to, but that doesn't mean I have to ignore or forget about the fact that I am of Indian origin. And that, increasingly, as I get asked to talk to young New Zealanders from our diverse multicultural communities, and I've done a fair bit of that of late, so I've been reflecting on my values and who I am, and what message I want to share with the next generation as well. We have, at the end of the day, 213 ethnicities represented in Auckland alone. Collectively, we speak 160-odd languages, and there is strength in that. I always say, I maintain that our diversity, we're strong because of our diversity and not in spite of it. Today, I was talking to a young mum who has 3 sons under the age of 7. So she's of Sri Lankan origin, came here when she was 6 years old, grew up in New Zealand. She's married to a New Zealand Pākehā man. So of course their 3 sons are mixed. So she takes them to their local clinic to enroll her boys at this clinic so they can see their GP. And under ethnicity, she writes, of course, New Zealand European / Sri Lankan, because that's what her children are. Now at the GP, when they input that information, they take the first bit. So her children were enrolled as New Zealand European. So you can imagine the surprise that their GP got when this very visibly Sri Lankan young woman comes in with 3 little boys who look mixed. And so he said, oh, wait, hang on. It says New Zealand European here. But you've got to enroll your children based on how they look. Now that's an issue. For our next generations and the generations to come, the way you look and the way you feel and who you are can be quite different. So we've got to move, we've got to adapt, we've got to recognize some of these challenges because identity has a huge role to play. It's who we are. And who we are is where largely we get our confidence from and our self-esteem. So how then can we talk about authentic leadership, whether it's in the business world or any other sphere, if we don't address some of these intrinsic aspects of who we are? How then can we be authentic? And so that's my message often when I speak to young people from our communities. It's be strong in who you are. You may look, you may sound, you may think differently from those who are around you, but that's the strength that we have here in Aotearoa, the strength that we have to maximize that diversity of context, of experience, of perspectives that we bring. And part of that is the diversity of who we are. So I'll end with just 2 quick quotes. One is Kate Shepherd's famous quote that should empower us all to fight the stereotypes, the boxes that we're put in, whether it's because of our gender or our ethnicity. All that separates, whether race, creed, class, or sex, is inhuman and must be overcome. And we must overcome it together. Nā tō roro, nā taku roro, ka ora ai te iwi. With your food basket and my food basket, the people will thrive. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. We've got a couple of questions here, but we also just wanted to open it up to the audience. If you've got a question that you want to ask MP Priyanka, now's your time. We have a few on the app, but just think of something if you have something to ask Priyanka.
Oh, I didn't get there, did I? Yes, I did. I did, and I wore it proudly.
We've got one question here, and it's how does the Labour Party plan to improve international trade with Asian countries to help our small businesses? Good question.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, we are a small trading nation, and that's absolutely you know, there are huge benefits, and there have to be benefits from trade to our small business owners as well. I guess there are 2 points that I'd like to make. One is, and you might hopefully all have heard about the Trade for All agenda, and that's some of the government's been consulting on the Trade for All agenda, and that's to ensure that our small businesses do actually benefit from opening up export markets, and also to ensure that our women entrepreneurs specifically, because trade has a gendered component, and if we are looking to ensure that everyone benefits from it, we've got to ensure that it benefits our women entrepreneurs as well. And I'll just talk, I don't have a lot of the detail with me at the moment, but I'll just talk very briefly about the CPTPP. We've just had the amendment bill passed through Parliament that will allow us as a country to ratify the CPTPP. Now, initially, you'll know that Labour had 5 bottom lines, part of which was to ensure that we had reach into markets so that it was beneficial for us. Part of it was to ensure that we retained sovereignty, and also another part of it was ensuring that we could, as a government, govern in the best interests of New Zealand. And part of that was ensuring that we could stop, which we have done, foreign ownership of existing homes here in New Zealand. So previous government said it couldn't do that. This government, both the Trade Minister and the Prime Minister, went in to negotiate for that, and we did get that. But also, of course, ensuring that we can open up some of those markets. So CPTPP, for example, gets us into Japan, where we haven't had a trade deal. Huge market for us as well. And some of these trade deals, all of these trade deals, do that, and that's what we're focusing on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thanks.